What's going on, everyone? I'm Travis Brown with the Eagle alongside my weekly pal, Jay Arnold, former defensive tackle for the Aggies. Jay, what's going on, bud?
Hey, just enjoying this cold weather. Being in Houston, it's nice to not sweat when I'm walking outside. So, uh, taking the wins where I can find them, much like this Aggie football team.
I think I think I'm okay with the colder weather. I'm ready for the rain to stop. I'm kind of over the cold rain.
Yeah, I think everybody was over the cold rain on Saturday.
There you go. Let's get into that UMass game first, where A&M won, but just like you said, the weather it wasn't really pretty. I think the thing that stuck out the most to me is you're listening through the first half of the game, and the commentators are talking about A&M's both lines, mostly the offensive line, both lines getting bullied at times against UMass, which many consider to be the worst FBS team in the country this year. What did you see from those lines? Did you agree with that? And why was A&M maybe getting pushed around a little bit by UMass?
Yeah, so offensive line I think did struggle once again. It was, I mean, the UMass defensive line. I think Jalen Mackey was a guy that we saw make quite a few plays for UMass. I mean, he's a good player, but it's still you look at an SEC offensive line and to give up the kind of pressure that they did is unacceptable. Now there were some offensive struggles that came due to the weather. I think you did have UMass kind of loading up the box a little bit more just because of the conditions. And there was times where A&M has struggled at picking up blitzes. I mean, Connor Wegman's getting hit and basically a lot of the same stuff that we've seen all season. Defensively, I don't think the defensive line was getting bullied necessarily, but it was, again, an issue where the defensive line isn't necessarily shedding blocks. They're not getting driven downfield like some opponents are capable of doing. But if you're not shedding blocks and making tackles, UMass is able to get positive yards, and I think we saw a lot of that on Saturday.
I want to put something into question to you on the X's and O's, and it's on the offensive side of the ball, and that is we asked Jimbo about why the running game took so long to get going for the Aggie offense there in the game, and he talked about, like you said, Don Brown is notorious for loading the box up and forcing you to win with the pass game. Of course, that didn't play into the weather that well on Saturday. But that being said, it is the 102nd run defense in the country. What a lot of people say is one of the worst FBS teams in the country. Uh, should an offense and should a running offense that has the talent that A&M has be able to run against a defense like that, even if they have more guys in the box? Or is that simply a numbers thing, no matter what the level of competition is?
I mean, it can be tough no matter what if the numbers are in the other team's favor. And I do want to point out that A&M did kind of take over in the rushing attack towards the end of the game. I think they kind of wore down UMass a little bit, and they still got over 200 yards rushing. They still averaged 5.5 yards per carry. Now, I will say that a big part of that, is because of Connor Wegman's ability to scramble a little bit and design pass plays where he wasn't necessarily supposed to be running. But I do think that you saw Le'Veon Moss kind of have some bigger runs towards the end. You saw Amari Daniels break off a bigger run towards the end, and part of that was A&M just kind of wearing down that UMass defense. But you still would have liked to see them have more early success and not have it be a deal where you had to wear UMass down first before you were able to kind of see those creases open up.
It was cold. It was rainy. It was gross. What was it? Did you ever play in a game that was that combination? What are those games like for the players?
Yeah, it's not fun, right? Because it's okay to be cold, it's okay to be wet, but when it's both at the same time, it's a pretty miserable feeling. I think the most comparable game for this would have been when we played at LSU in Death Valley in 2013. Where it was kind of a cold and rainy game in Baton Rouge. Probably not as as hard of a rain as A&M was experiencing Saturday, but it's something that makes it hard to hold on to the ball. Makes it, for quarterbacks, it's, there's going to be times where the ball doesn't go where you want it to. And I think we saw that quite a bit too from Connor Wegman on Saturday. But A&M was able to survive, which is, again, not a word that you'd like to use against UMass.
From a defensive line perspective, does it affect the footing?
Definitely. So it's harder to really dig in to the turf. I know, like, to go to a different sport here in rugby, when you get into like a muddy pitch out there, they actually have like different studs that they'll put on the cleats that are able to kind of give you more traction. Football doesn't really have those removable cleats as much. So it's something where you're gonna slip a little bit, and sometimes that can affect your get off as a defensive lineman. You're not able to kind of explode through your hips and get your feet down to push off like you normally would. Uh, the flip side of that is the offensive line is going to have the same issues, right? It's going to be just kind of a little bit of a slipping and sliding type of game where sometimes one guy's cleats hang on the turf and sometimes they don't. And a lot of times, if you're unlucky enough, your feet may come right out from under you, and that's something that you have to be prepared for. And unfortunately, it's a not as fun part of this type of weather and this type of game.
Sure. So looking at Saturday, the Aggies host LSU, and it's supposed to be mostly sunny, high of 63 and low of 46. So cold might be a little bit in there, but rain not so much. But that being said, not probably the best matchup that A&M wants to go out on the season with.
No, you look at the two things that A&M has struggled with. That's protecting the passer and dual threat quarterbacks. And Harold Perkins is one of the best pass rushers in the SEC. Now, I think he's really come into his own as the season has progressed, and he's even better than he was when he started. He single-handedly dominated that game against Arkansas. I mean, it was a joy to watch, taking away the fact that I knew A&M was going to have to play him later in the season. And then you look at the other side of the ball for LSU, Jaden Daniels, and he's somebody that can do a lot of damage with his legs, which is something that A&M has struggled with all year in mobile quarterbacks. So you look at those two factors, and it's not exactly what you want to see on paper for Texas A&M going in the last game of the season.
I know a lot of people might say that LSU is having the season maybe that A&M was expecting to have. You've watched a little bit of LSU. I know you watched a lot of A&M. How would you compare the two programs? Why is LSU on the rise and A&M not so much?
There's always a little bit of excitement anytime a first year head coach comes in, but LSU is always one of those teams that I feel like has been a talent rich team, even when they're down. I think they're a team that recruits pretty well and has good role players. Generally speaking, I mean, I can't remember a time where they weren't a very talented team, even if they weren't getting the execution out there on the field. I think you got a guy in Brian Kelly as well, who is a great football coach. I mean, he had a lot of success at Notre Dame. So him coming in his first year, kind of being able to energize the program, you see a lot with that. And then you look at a team that's just kind of gotten better as the season has progressed. I think they've gelled a little bit. You've got a really tough guy to prepare for in Jaden Daniels, like I was talking about with the dual threat abilities. But I just think the key part is they've improved as the season has gone on.
Mm-hmm.
That after that first game, that first loss against Florida State, I think a lot of people wrote LSU off. And then obviously there was the blowout loss to Tennessee at home. But it just seems like since that Tennessee game, a switch has kind of flipped. And really it was the second half of the game against Ole Miss, where I think I started to see that team come together. And, they did have offensive struggles against Arkansas. That was kind of a similar deal to A&M's game against UMass, where it was cold, a little bit wet. I know they were talking about the Arkansas staff decided to turn the sprinklers on in the field up there in Fayetteville to try to melt the ice a little bit. I don't know if that was the best strategy, but it was. I think LSU has just improved, and A&M has not gotten better since the season has kicked off. It's just been stale. And maybe it's kind of a indictment of where the program is right now, that there hasn't been improvement as the season has gone on.
Yeah, exactly. So this LSU game has been one that has grown as kind of a rivalry game. I believe when you were playing, it was still on Thanksgiving, correct?
So I think they did play it on that Thursday.
Yeah.
I'd have to go back and check, but
Yeah.
I'm
So
pretty sure.
I know it wasn't quite the rivalry or the heated game as it is now, but what was it like ending the season off with the Tigers, and how that's built from when you were playing?
Yeah, I mean, so there was always a lot of guys on the team from Louisiana. So those guys really got up whenever we played LSU. I think there was some built-in kind of animosity there, and then also just playing against guys from high school that for those guys. But LSU is one of those programs that you want to compete with. There's somebody that's been extremely successful. I mean, you look at the 2019 national championship, 2011. I think was the year that Les Miles won it, and then 2003. I'd have to, maybe it was 2007. Anyways, it's a team that has always been near the upper echelon of the sport and in the SEC West. So as Texas A&M, you want to have those types of peers, almost say, to close the season out against. And I think that's something that A&M's always kind of look forward to. And then there's obviously a little bit of animosity there, going back to 2018 and the 7 overtime game. I think has kind of raised the animosity between these two schools quite a bit.
Yeah. So I know you mentioned some facts, but what are the keys to A&M? As Jalen Preston would have said it, pissing in their cornflakes this weekend.
Well, the first thing you got to do is you're going to have to figure out how to keep Harold Perkins from getting pressure on Connor Wegman. And it's not just Harold Perkins, but he's going to be the matchup that you're looking at. I mean, keep an eye on where he is located during the game, where he's lined up, and then you also got to look at I think DJ Durkin's going to have to spy Jaden Daniels offensively to keep him in the pocket. Even if it's not a designed run, he'll still has tendency to get out of the pocket a little bit. Kind of, there's good receivers too for LSU, but I think you got to try to make Jaden Daniels more of a pocket passer to beat you, to really have a chance, because A&M has just struggled against the run so much.
Yeah. So close it out the way we always do. What's your meal recommendation for a season-ending game against LSU?
Yeah, so for me personally, I think with this one, there's so much good food in Louisiana. There's no shortage of incredible Cajun or Creole dishes, depending on what part of the state you're in. For me personally, though, getting with the Texas barbecue tint of things, I am probably going to head over to Pinkerton's barbecue at some point this week and get some of his duck and sausage jambalaya to kind of set the tone for a meeting with LSU.
There it is, Jay. Thanks so much again for your time. We'll be back next week after the LSU game for one last talk with Jay to put a little bow on this season and look at some of the big picture stuff. So until then, we'll talk to you later, Jay.
Thanks for having me, Travis.